Okay, so let's dive into it. Thanks everyone for joining. Welcome to the latest user workshop. We try to do this every 4 to 6 weeks. I'm Javi. This is Pedro, the Grand Pumbaa, the Obi-Wan of cmBuilder. Pedro, yeah, exactly. Pedro is going to be leading the session today. We want to do this a little different. We have an agenda that we're going to work through, but please, lately people have just, you might be working on something right now, right? You have a project literally right now or something you're doing and you got some questions on, hey, how can I do this? How can I drop in the Q&A or in the chat, drop your questions. I'll work the Q&A and the last 10 to 15 minutes, and we can even stay longer if you want. We can just work through some of your specific questions you have. So it's not meant to be fully prescriptive. We're going to work through some of the latest stuff and some other, some improvements, but please drop your questions in. We'll answer them as we go, and at the end, we can even take a little bit, we can go deep dive into specific stuff that people are working on. And then the nice thing about this is there's, 30, 35, we had 100 people sign up, a whole bunch of people will get benefit from that. So we might learn from each other depending on what you guys are trying to accomplish with the product. So I will stop there, pass it to Pedro, and let's get rocking and rolling. So yeah, work the Q&A, the chat. I'll be doing that. Pedro's been taking the lead. Let's get after it. Go ahead, Pedro.
Awesome. Can everybody hear me fine and see my screen? Okay, cool. Yeah, so for today's workshop agenda, we are gonna go through some of our latest upgrades and like new tools, right? So the first one's gonna be Earthwork upgrades, stuff related to excavation and custom terrain. Then we're gonna move on to the resource upgrades, like how the dynamic and constant things are working right now, the swap action and the movement for specific objects. Then we're going to go into the 3D lines. It's a new tool that we did recently, and it's super cool to highlight specific parts of your area. And then we're going to show some user help updates and the tips and tricks. Okay, everything is going to be available on YouTube after 24 hours, and we also have like a bunch of workshops over there that you guys can check and see how it goes. Okay, so next page over here, let's go into the Earthwork upgrades. Okay, so I'm gonna just get out of my presentation mode over here, and then we can do this a little bit more customized. So the first one is the improved resolution. So there's something that we already touched base on this on previous workshops, but I just wanted to remind everyone that I've talked to a couple customers recently, and I noticed that they haven't checked that yet. But basically, what happens is that we have created this new switch over here that will allow you to have a more accurate topographic resolution for your terrains, right? So to do that is you have to click on this little two arrows over here on the side, and then click on scenario settings and make sure that these two options are turned on, right? So what this does is that the excavation performance will be better if you turn this on, based on some upgrades that we've done recently. And also you can improve the accuracy of the topography of your terrain. So the idea is that once you start doing your custom terrains and you start creating excavations, before we had to reduce the quality of the terrain to make sure that the competition wouldn't clash or anything like that. But now this is already better. So just turn that switch on and everything will be working fine for you. Just this
Let
little
me
guy over here.
let me cut you off. So for the technical folks here, if anyone was pushing the previous excavation algorithm we had, if you did a whole bunch of cuts like in a single milestone or a bunch of operations in a single milestone, the more you added, the slower it would start to bog down, right? So we kind of had a looping system which it had to, the more data that you added in earlier milestones, so we used to say to people, hey, try to make different operations at different milestones as you can. There were some workarounds, but the new algorithm is more scalable. So it doesn't bog down. We start adding far more cuts and fills and ramps and
Mhm.
operations to more detailed. You can have hundreds of them, and it should scale nicely, not like
Yeah.
start to bog down the system. Sorry, go ahead.
And this should be on by default for every new scenarios that you guys are working on right now. But for the latest ones, just make sure that you check that to use the latest tool. Okay. Second thing about the Earthworks upgrades is that we have now variable loads for excavation. So I'm gonna use this example over here that we did in workshop in the past, where like there's an excavation happening at some point, and if I hide these resource over here for the shoring, we can take this excavation as an example. And in here, I'm gonna go and edit this cut, right? So now editing this cut, I have the slope wall action over here. So when I turn this on, it's very similar to what it was before, but the difference now is that you have this command that shows apply to all or set ratio for each slope. So what this does is that when you have it applied to all and you type in a ratio over here, the same ratio is going to be applied for all of these walls. But if you change the set ratio for each slope, now each slope can have its own ratio. So the first value over here is related to the height, and the second value is related to the length of that slope. So if I increase the length of this slope A over here, you're going to see that only slope A is going to change and the others will remain on a 1-to-1. And this now is a 1-to-2. Okay, so you can do that to represent several different things related to your excavation shapes. So you can even use those slopes to create a ramp or something like that. But that's the idea, that now you have more control about how each slope is, what is the ratio for each one of the slopes on your site, right? So just a reminder over here that L is going to represent the length and H is going to represent the height ratio. Okay. Now moving on to the custom terrain interface. So this is more like an update on the interface, and just like the commands that you're seeing and in the custom terrain tool. So basically, if we go over here to the custom terrain, um, this will, let me just go back over here to the first milestone. And now we have these buttons over here on the top that we have two options, right? So before, the first option was points, now it's meshes. But you can also go to points and by clicking on the drop down over here. So when I click on the drop down for points, this these comments are going to be a little bit different now and a little bit more polished, but the main idea is basically the same. So you just put in a point and you're going to move them up and down, right? But now we have all the commands on how to move the points, how to add a point, import a CSV, download a template, generate a preview, and export the CSV. They are all over here on the side, and it cleared up the panel over here to be a little bit cleaner, and it's easier to understand now. So the blending mode is basically just the different algorithms that we use to calculate how the new terrain is supposed to be. So you can choose between three different options. We suggest that if you're using like um, a small quantity of points, that maybe the first option will be better because it kind of like propagates a little bit more with like less points. But the kriging groups and the kriging, they are more accurate if you have more points to work with, right? So the propagation is a little bit different. So you can try between these three to see which one's going to give you the best result. But usually we just give the default as the kriging groups because it's a good balance of accuracy and speed of processing times. Okay, and every point that you add over here, we create this table, this list where you can see what is the coordinates for those points, and you can change those coordinates between the scene that you are at the moment or the UTM reference for that. So just keep in mind that natively in cmBuilder, we're using a specific georeference systems. It is the WGS84, but we are planning on increasing that, to expanding that to have more georeferencing systems, not just for the points that you have over here, but also for the models that you import. They are geolocated. So right now we can already geolocate like most of models. Sometimes we need to do some pre-processing before you import the model in, but that's a different discussion. I'm just showing you how you can apply that to your projects over here. Okay, so this is a good improvement in terms of like how cleaning up this interface, and the plan is to expand this more for other tools in cmBuilder as well. Okay.
Pedro, can I double click on one thing? So what a lot of
Yes.
people do, just getting questions from users, is they'll import and overlay a drawing that has your contour line elevations on it. So if you have like a civil drawing, you can just overlay, project on the terrain, and then use the elevations on the drawing to drop points on, right, and make it match.
Yeah.
And then you can use the contour line feature inside the settings to visualize that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know, sometimes you don't need a full blown survey imported, you can just use your drawing that you have and go from there.
Yep. Exactly. So let me see. I have a drawing on this project over here, but sadly that doesn't show any of the contour lines. But imagine that this drawing would have like all the contour lines for this terrain. You could use that to trace the points that you're going to use and bring the terrain to up to the contour lines that you use on your survey. Okay, cool. Awesome. So that's it for earthwork upgrades. And let's move on now to the resource upgrades. So a couple people have requested that we would do the sorry, let me restart. So most of our resources that you place it on from the library, they all have the positioning method, which is constant and dynamic, right? So before, the every object will be positioned as a constant object by default, which means that that object would have only one position in all milestones. So if I make this position constant, it will mean that if for every milestone, this object will stay in the same spot in the same rotation. If I put this to be dynamic, it means that per milestone, this object can have more than one position. So you see how this is moving down? It's only possible because this object is set up to be dynamic. If I make this constant and I keep moving it, so you see it's not moving down. So that's the difference between constant and dynamic. But the difference that the change that we did recently is that now every object will be dynamic by default, right? So most of objects that you're placing on your site, um, there's no like majority of one is dynamic and one in what is dynamic and what is constant. We have like a good like spread out of like objects that should be dynamic and objects that should be constant. But a lot of people were requesting that we put this dynamic as default, so that's what we changed, and you will be able to move now between milestones quickly. But just keep in mind that, for example, for cranes, where usually you don't change the position for the cranes, you should place that and change your position to constant, okay? Just to prevent that this crane will move in between milestones. Cool?
Yeah, I think just on that part, we had it. So if you're sometimes something moves and you don't know why, right? We get this a lot.
Mhm.
Oh, something moved in my scenario. So if you're in dynamic, just keep an eye on that. You can always go into the history log and move stuff back. But if you know
Yeah.
that crane is a set height and a set dimension, it's not going to change, lock it, or make it as constant. If you want to show jumps in the crane, you got to set it as dynamic.
Yeah. So one good way to visualize what's changing for that resource in between the different milestones is to open the timeline details. So whenever you double click on an object, let's say that I'm on milestone 6 over here. If I double click on this object, the the side panel will open, focusing the time on that milestone in this timeline details. But you can see over here that I can visualize that on milestone 5 there was a position and a rotation that was updated. So from milestone 3 to 4, position and rotation updated. If I It means that like that object moved between one milestone to the other. If I want to cancel that, I can simply click on this X button over here and that movement is going to be canceled. Okay, in that milestone. Cool. So let's go now to the swap option. So the swap option is a very interesting one, something that a lot of our customers requested this. So basically, the idea is that now you can simply replace an object by another one without having to add the object again, right? So before, let's say that I started my plan working with a fence and I'm going to create a fence over here at this location. And then I created this as a solid plywood fence, something like this. Later on, I am in the discussion with my team, and they say that it's better that we do this with a chain link fence. So instead of deleting this one and adding a chain link fence, now we have this option over here. That's the swap to a different resource. And I can click on this and then select another fence, and then my object will change to the new option that I selected. Okay, so this can be applied to every resource, and you can replace every resource by any resource. So I can replace a crane by a fence, for example. So this is something that you need to keep track of, like, so you won't make like changes that you don't want. And another thing that's interesting to do as well is always to make sure that the parameters that you assign for one resource will be carried over to the other one. We will do our best to try to bring, like, let's say that you have a crane that you adjust the parameters for, like height, jibs, lengths, and whatnot, and then you change it to another crane. We're going to do our best to map those changes so it will stay the same, but not always you're going to have that same parameters from one resource to the other, right? So it's good to also double check if the parameters that for the new resource is exactly what you want. Okay. So
Go in here. So I just had a good talk with a customer recently where they're optioneering on crane locations, luffing versus hammerhead crane, stuff like this. So this is another great use case. So you're using the same, let's say you've located the optimal position for the crane or cranes, but you're just not sure which, crane you need in terms of load, max, max capacity, all these kind of things. You could just use those same inputs to just swap them out, luffing versus hammerhead, et cetera, and just like optioneer the best solution very quickly. So that's another good use case for the swap feature.
yeah, so for example, let's say that this crane over here, I'm not gonna build just this building, I'm gonna also build another building over here, another building over here. So let's say that I'm doing the work of understanding if this crane is gonna make all the picks. So I'm gonna go into my resource coverage envelope over here, and I'm gonna change this so I can access the um, the hook location. So let's say that the maximum hook location for this crane was going to be something like this. So we know right away that the crane is not going to work if I put this in this position, right? So I have a couple of options. One is to move the crane somewhere else or change this crane by another one. So I can simply go in here and say, actually, I need something that is bigger than 175. So I can go into my library, click on my cranes, and then I can go over here in my max reach range and put like a minimum value that's more than 175. So that will show me the cranes, only the cranes that will make that pick, right? So I can simply now replace this one by another one that would fit the purpose of my project. Cool. Is that clear? I believe so. Again, if you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat so we can check it. If it's a real life situation that you have been through while using cmBuilder and you had like something that the resource swap would help you with that, just let us know. We can replicate this over here in the session. Okay, cool. So the third resource upgrade for resources, sorry, is the animation on path. This is a great update, okay? And this is something that we are doing using our visual graph tool, which allows you to create an actual movement of vehicles around your site. So I'm going to show you how to do it today. And we are using the dump truck resource as a test. Keep in mind that the visual graph is something that's an experimental feature still. We are like improving that as we go. But the idea is that we are gonna create, put in a dump truck. So if I go over here, equipment and vehicles, transport vehicle, and I scroll all the way down, I'm gonna find the dump truck over here. So when I put this dump truck, this object, specifically this object, if you go into the visual programming, actually for the visual programming, you have to go into user preferences first and turn these on. Okay, so turn the experimental feature visual programming to use that, but also custom terrain to use the things related to the custom terrain. Okay, so when you turn the visual programming switch on, this tab is going to show up over here. So you click on that tab. And for this resource specifically, we have a programming template that's called swap path, right? So this, now that I apply this, nothing has happened yet, because if I open the editing for the interface of visual programming, I'm looking at what's happening over here in the backend, right? So this is just the coding that we are using to make that object move. And the only thing that's missing right now is a 3D line. So a 3D line is an object that I'm gonna show right now how to do it. And is also part of our workshop today. So it's the next step. So it's kind of like the two work. These two parts, it's kind of like the same, but let me show you how to add a 3D line, right? So if you go into project setup and click on 3D line, now you will start drawing what's going to be the 3D line, right? So the 3D line is just like a 3D reference of an annotation, and you can use that to create a, a linear annotation on your site. So if I do this and do another line that goes over here and goes inside, when I hit confirm, by default, this object over here is going to start walking, like moving on top of that 3D line. Because if I open that visual programming again, um, this is referencing the 3D line number 1, right? So if I had another 3D line, I could also use that to put in a different path. So if I create a new different 3D line over here, I'm going to explain in a minute how to use the 3D line. I'm just using this as an example for this object. So if I create another 3D line over here and I added this visual programming for this guy, I can change this option from 3D line 1 to 3D line 2. And now this object is going to start working on top of the 3D line 2. Okay. So how can you use this for other objects? So one thing that you can do is you can, let's say that I want to apply the same movement to any other car or any other vehicle in my library. So what you're going to do is you're going to export this swept path graph over here. Once you select the swept path, you can export that and you're going to download a file that's a JSON file. Okay, so this is just a template for the code that controls that animation. So if I want to add any other resource over here, let's say if I go to my Star Wars thingy over here and I want to put in maybe a TIE fighter in this location, I can go into my visual programming and now I can take that same file that I downloaded over here and add to this area. So this will add the custom graph over here. And it's not moving yet because we have to do one final adjustment, is that you go into edit, and in here you see now I have this node represents the object that I'm working with. I'm just going to connect this object to this selection, and then I'm going to change from dump truck to the spaceship, right? So this will basically is telling me what I'm doing over here is that I'm telling the software that instead of using the dump truck, use this spaceship to do the movement. So now you're going to see that the spaceship is moving over here. Okay. And another thing that you can do to change that is to increase this value to increase the speed as well. So if I click on this guy and I put in like 2 over here, you see, oh, that starfighter is going a little bit crazy. So let's reduce the value over here. And yes, the Millennium Falcon is available. So if you want to, let's say, create a path for the Millennium Falcon, use this line and make it actually fly. We can move that 3D line upwards, putting the Millennium Falcon over here, and then going to the visual programming. I'm going to grab the same file and put it over here, edit, and then I'm going to do that adjustment of like connecting the objects now to the Millennium Falcon to the selection of the object, change this, and I'm going to go back to the first 3D line. And also I'm going to put in a different value over here for the speed. And you're going to see the, the Millennium Falcon going a little bit crazy over there. Cool. Not sure if Han Solo is going to be seasick over there.
So a couple things. I think you might get into it in the 3D line part, but so it looks a little complicated, but it's not like the idea here is this is like a kind of a first step towards us allowing some templates that will be just drop downs that you can use, edit yourself, and then make available for your users. And that 3D line, you can also change that. You can like disconnect it from the timeline. You can have it show up at certain milestones. You can have it, dashed. You can make it hidden so you don't actually see a 3D line. You just see things flying or crane, trucks driving. And really this is like important for showing vehicles coming into site, how you're going to be able to execute certain, like it's not the mathematical like international standard swept path, but it's a good representation of what you're going to do.
Hmm.
Pedro, can I ask you one more question? Can
Yeah.
you please search in intermediate interstate semi truck? So we also started, so swept path and like the site logistics around turn radiuses of vehicles getting to site. We just added these things here. So what that is, if you're ever just wanting to validate quickly, like it's not a, like there's whole softwares that do this, right? So the idea here is just to quickly validate based on a position to scale of my temporary users, if I'm going to be able to make a turn. Those volumes are the swept path of that multi-axle semi truck, right? So
Yeah.
there's like a handful of them. If you go into one and you see one that you want, just pop it, just add it in the resource request. Say, hey, please add the swept path to this, and we'll do it for you. Okay, so we
Hmm.
added to like a handful of them already, like the bus, I think the city buses, the semi trucks,
Yeah, we have over here
garbage
city
trucks.
bus, intermediate, semi-truck, interstate
Yeah.
semi-truck, and whatnot.
So this is just like a good, if you want to just we get this a lot, right? Pedro often in his customer support calls, they'll say, hey, I just need to I need to validate if I'm going to be able to get a truck back in here, right?
Hmm.
Do this from a site logistics perspective. You can actually just plunk this in and have a visual reference to understand, okay, it doesn't have to be animated. It's just a quick check, right? To
Yeah,
see if I'm going to be able to make the turn.
exactly. So yeah,
Good.
so these two tools like side by side, like you can represent and double check a lot of different access points for your site. Cool. Okay, so let's now explain. Let me just delete these guys because they're very distracted. So let's learn how to use the 3D line now. So I'm gonna delete the ones that I created over here so far, and we will be able to then, oh, why can I select this one? It was on the ground. Okay, so if I can select that over there, I'm gonna select it over here. So, okay. So let's learn how to use the 3D lines. So I'm going to change my view over here to map view just because it's a little bit easier to visualize that in a clear background. But the idea of the 3D lines is that you can use, we remove the property lines feature and we replace that by the 3D lines because the 3D lines can be used for many other things, right? So you can use that to represent your property lines. You can use that to represent utility lines, highlight where the fences are, and other things like the path of trucks and so on and so forth. And the idea is that you just go over here in project setup, click on 3D line, and then you're going to start drawing like you draw anything using the sketch, right? So let's say, for example, that I want to highlight a specific part of this area. I always change my view to 2D when I'm working with a sketch just to make sure that I'm selecting the right points. And I'm going to go ahead and create a 3D line over here to indicate a property line. So when I do that and hit confirm, the 3D line is a one object that has one elevation. So it's kind of like a cylinder that stays at a certain elevation, right? And you can change a lot of like a lot of things related to its visibility over here on the side. So the first thing is I like to project that on the terrain because it kind of like takes that cylinder and puts that on the terrain as like a nice delineation of a specific area. And then you can also change the style over here to a dashed line, and you can play with the scale of that dashed line over here, and you can play with the width of that line to make it thinner and so on and so forth. So it compared to the property line that we had before, this is way more visible. You have more control about how you want to show specific things and highlight that area, right? So this is a little bit of like the controls that you have about the style of that 3D line. And also the same idea that we have for all everything else related to the timeline, you can add the from date, which is going to be the first milestone that's going to show up, the to date, which is going to be the last milestone in which that's going to be visible, or you can disconnect that from your timeline to use that only as a reference. When I do that and hit done, that object is gone because it's not a part of my sequence, but you can still refer back to it by going over here on the Maldo browser and going to site planning, project setup, and then see that 3D line over here. When you select that, you will know where that object is. So you can go ahead, edit that. And if you want that to be visible at all times, just deactivate the disconnect from the timeline. And when you hit done, that object's going to be there. Okay. So one thing that's important to remember over here is that we have a limit of how many things we can project on the ground in cmBuilder, and that's a limit that's more like for computational reasons than because of us. We are trying to find ways to remove that limit, but for now, the limit is that you can project up to 8 elements on your site. So elements that can be projected are drawings, zones, 3D labels, and 3D lines. So every drawing counts as one projection. Every 3D label counts as one projection. All the zones counts as one projection. So you can have like as many zones as you want, and it will only count as one. And the same thing for the 3D lines. You can have as many 3D lines as you want, and it will count only as one. Okay.
One clarification. I just community notes Twitter style fact checked you. Um, so as per the team, as of like very recent, we release every Monday. So one thing about our product, if you have thought stuff, please tell us because every single Monday we're constantly improving the product. And as of this, I think either this Monday, last Monday, zones and lines don't have limits anymore. So you can project as many as you want. So this, yeah, Pedro went on vacation, everything changed. Just kidding. But I believe so. Drawings and labels do. So 3D labels and drawings still have the same limit that Pedro said, eight total. But zones and lines do not have limits anymore. So there's no, you can have as many as you want, as
Yeah.
per the product team. So that's hot off the press. Hot off the press. Sorry. Go on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so one thing that you can use the lines for also is to highlight utility lines. So if you have something that's on the ground that you want to highlight, you have a drawing that you want to represent that, you can also use your 3D lines to represent that. So you're showing like a main water line that's coming from here, and you just project that on your terrain, put that as a dash line, put the color of like the main water line that you usually use, and now you represent that how you have that main water line coming in. So you can also put in a label. So you can do something like this and say main water, you know. So it's a quick way for you to represent those impacts and things in your plan.
Actually,
Can you
I never thought of that. That's a good idea because we have a water line resource, so you can
hmm
sketch a water. But sometimes for the purposes of just your a planning piece for the client or the city, you might not need to go to that level of detail, like and do the certain diameter of when water line pipe. This is a great little hack there. I didn't even see that before. So
hmm
you could do that with anything, right? Temporary power stuff like that. Oh, we got
So
a question, Pedro. Let me ask
yeah.
you: can you change the elevation of the 3D lines points? Or says,
Not
can you?
yet. So like the 3D lines will be all points of the 3 lines will be following your sketch. So like this one over here, for example, if I deactivate that from the projection of my terrain, you see that all of them will be following the same elevation as this sketch over here. So if I move them up, they will all move as one, and we don't have yet the idea of controlling every single elevation of each one of the lines. But that's a great request, and I'm pretty sure that we are gonna do that eventually.
You can obviously do arcs and like
hmm
curves and things like one thing I saw Pedro do with a customer recently where in an isometric view they did like a 3D curved arrow to show how they're going to bring a prefabricated unit into like a hospital. So like they're going to use existing building and they kind of showed okay we're going to bring the equipment, we're going to swing it around here. So they did like a 3D
hmm
arced curve with an arrow, which was pretty nice to be able to tell that
Yeah.
story.
Yes. So, but this is Antonio. This is a great opportunity for you for me to let you know as well that you can do a feature request at any time. So, like something like this, that we don't have that yet. You can click over here in the feature request and describe what you want. And if you can tell us why you want that, it also helps a lot because we can provide different solutions for the same problem. Okay. Cool. So Moving on to the next step is user help updates, right? So this is like a constant effort that we have over here at cmBuilder to make sure that everybody that starts using cmBuilder will have access to knowledge and how to um, the their objective fast. So we are improving our knowledge platform, right? So now if you go to the user guide, it's very similar to what we had before. You're gonna see that the menu over here is a little bit different, and not and now that when you open this, you're also gonna see like same references that we had before, but the difference is that when you open this in the new tab, you're gonna see that in our new user base platform, right? So this is what we're going to be using from here on. Is this the idea of like providing more knowledge in a better way to consume that? And if you go back to the support center, you're going to see something like that where I have like the different steps for you to understand more about cmBuilder. And we are going to try to also improve a lot about the frequently asked questions, because there's a lot of things that people ask us, and I ask myself, and like and I give them like a specific instruction about how to do a demolition state, for example. And so we're gonna start adding these instructions over here on the FAQ. It's gonna be way easier for us to communicate with you guys and direct you to the right piece of knowledge. Okay. Also, um, along with this effort, we are creating a series of tutorial videos on YouTube. So if you click over here on tutorial videos, but also you can access that from the learning resources over here on the top on the question mark, and you're going to see a list of the videos that we are creating. We are trying to do a video per week. Every week you're going to see something new over here, and this is basically just giving everyone instructions about how to use the software and how to go through every one of our features. And it's a great way for you guys as well to share with your team. So if there's anyone new in your team that you want to start using, and you don't want to have like a onboarding session right away, you can simply direct them to this, and they will be able to start using it and learn about the project. But always keep in mind that everything related to onboarding and training is unlimited, so you can always reach out to have like specific one-on-one sessions or new teams onboardings and so on and so forth. Okay, cool. So let's move on now to the tips and tricks. Right. So tips and tricks. I just wanted to highlight one thing that I've noticed that a couple people don't know yet, is that how our sequencing logic works for most of our objects and for imported models, right? So every object in cmBuilder, most of the objects in cmBuilder will have the timeline definition over here. So the timeline has a from and a to date. This is very basic. I've already explained this for a lot of people, but I just wanted to show the difference between the from and to date when you're working with elements that you are adding in the cmBuilder, like resources, lines, zones, drawings, and everything, compared to the model, right? So when you import a model and you want to define the timeline for that model, let's say this door over here, for example, this timeline has a from and a to date as well. It's the same logic. So this from and to date does not refer to the start of the task of executing that door and the end of the task of executing that door. This refers to this. The from is when it's going to show up in our view, and the to is when it's going to be removed. So basically, for imported models, what this means is that the from date is that that part has been executed at by that date, and the to is you are defining when a part's going to be demolished, when that part's going to be demolished. So sometimes you're going to have models that you import over here, and that those models will carry over from Revit or any other CAD software, like parts that need to be demolished, right? So that's when you're going to be using the to date. The to date for models is to define the demolition state, and the from date is to define the execution date. Okay, cool. So just wanted to highlight that. The second tips and tricks is that now you can select objects that are projected on the ground. So this was something that a lot of our customers were struggling with at the beginning, where we had parts that whenever you projected them on the ground, you wouldn't be able to select that from the 3D view. You had to select them from the model browser. Now you're able to select projected parts. So for example, this drawing over here, it's projected on the terrain, and I simply selected that drawing by double clicking over here. Right, so this now allows me to quickly edit things that are projected on the ground. Also the zone over here, so there is a zone. This white shape over here is a zone that I simply double clicked, and now I can edit that. So it's just a quick tip for you to edit elements on your site a little bit faster. Okay, one thing that I want to highlight about this is that let's say that you have an excavation, for example, and at this excavation, I'm going to go ahead and show like a new satellite image, right? So when you're zoomed in and you're working, let's say, with this guy over here, and you wanted to select something else, usually that's that's what I do. I'm not sure if everyone does that. If I want to unselect this guy, I click somewhere else, right? But now you see that there is a white line over here and there is a white line over here. So this is telling me that what I just selected was that projected image. Okay, so if I click outside or in the terrain without anything projected it will unselect that. So just keep that in mind because sometimes you might be clicking on something like this, for example, and you click on something and don't know where you're clicking. It's just because you're selecting a part that is projected on your terrain. Okay, so to prevent that from happening, you can always lock that object. So when you lock it, it means that that object, double clicking on it is not going to open its menu for editing, and but you'll still select it. So if you want to edit this guy, you can unlock from here, or you can right click and unlock. Okay. So I just wanted to highlight that because I'm seeing some users selecting this and thinking that they are selecting the excavation. You're not, you're only selecting the drawing. And because there is an opening on the drawing over here, that's why you see the white line. Cool. Okay, so yeah, so a lot of
Pedro,
elements to
can I
prevent.
can I cut you off? Can I
Yeah,
cut you off? So we just got a question coming from Gabe. Thank you. That's how fast we operate in this place. Can you show how to export a video, please, and some of the settings you can do for the settings? So I think Gabe doesn't maybe it's not. Yeah, maybe show how you can export a video.
yeah, for sure. So the export video function, if you go to share over here, there is a export presentation video. So this is also like an experimental feature. So we are doing some adjustments to it still. But basically what happens is that when you select this and hit next, there are a couple of options for you to select over here. So video quality, I would suggest keep it as high. It doesn't it kind of like the improvement from high to highest is not that great, and you're gonna like just have like um, kind of like a heavier file, but you can use the highest if you want. And one important thing to notice is the recording speed. So the recording speed will allow you to record the video in the lower speed, because sometimes because of some limitations on the browser, the camera movements that you're gonna have might be a little bit choppy because of like how many things you have on your view, right? So if you have like a lot of resources, if you have a lot of models, those camera movements might be a little bit choppy just because the computer is trying to process that amount of information. But if you do slow the speed of recording, that camera movement is going to it's going to have its own more time to actually do the path. So it's a good practice to record the video in a lower speed. It's going to take a little bit longer, but you can speed it up in another software, right? So let's say that I want to create a video from this presentation. I can also hide the milestones, and I'm going to set up like the recording speed to half the speed. So when I hit next, now this shows up. This might be a little bit different per browser, and I'm using Chrome over here, but the idea is that when you click on that, we are going to start using the browser to record the screen. So this is a Chrome kind of like interface, and the idea is that I just need to select the tab that I'm working on, hit share, and now I have to click on play to start recording. So when I do click on play, I'm going to move my mouse away from the screen, because if I keep my mouse over there, the mouse is going to be recorded as well. Okay, so now these camera movements are going through like half of the speed, so it takes a little bit of time to record the whole thing. So it's you can leave it recording over here and go do something else, like brew some coffee and whatnot. And then once it's done playing the whole thing, you will download a file that's going to be a WebM file. So that WebM file is a file that can be played like in most of devices, like desktops, laptops, phones and everything. But if you want to convert that to MP4, you can also do that in another software. So usually I suggest to my users to use a software called Clipchamp, because it's a Microsoft software that's free, and you can simply log in and have that video processed over here. So when you click to create a new video, you can drop in that new that WebM file that's going to be downloaded from cmBuilder, put them in here, and then you'll be able to adjust the speed of that file. And when you hit export, it's going to export MP4. So it's kind of like already fixes those two things. And also this has a lot of different things over here you can use, but this is for you to explore a little bit more. This is just a solution because it's free and it's easy because it runs on the browser. Okay.
Just to explain why we have experimental is probably not the right word. It's just that we have to do a lot of stuff because there's lots of proprietary file formats, like MP4 is a proprietary file format. So we're trying to make it easy for you to just get the video out and then you can clean it up from there. Another tip and trick for that, maybe can you talk about if you open up each of those slides? So basically what presentation mode is doing is it's just taking each of your slides, any animations you have, call outs, camera angles, etc., and creating a slide and then playing those in unison, right? Basically automatically. Now, each one of these slides, Pedro, maybe you can show how you can adjust the speed of those slides. Like you can actually slow down each slide. If you want to stay on one a little longer, you can adjust the speeds of that. Maybe can you show that? Because I'm sure lots of people don't know how that works.
Yeah, so every slide that you create, when you open the slide over here, there we have these time settings where you have the slide transition and slide duration. Slide transition is how long the camera is gonna take to come from this point to this point, right? So that's the duration of the camera movement, and slide duration is how long the camera will stay at that slide before going to the next slide, right? So you can adjust this to your preferences. So if you want to kind of like do the slide transitions to take longer and so on and so forth, you can also do that. It's a way of adjusting that kind of like choppy movement of the camera and whatnot. Cool. And you can also apply that to all slides.
Yeah, when we do it, typically, especially if we have like a big, sophisticated simulation, we'll record it slowly. We'll make the slides slow. Press it, takes whatever 15 minutes or 10 minutes to make the video, and then use Clipchamp to clean it up, right? And then just make it in a file format that you can share. So so that's typically what we do. Then it just makes it nice and smooth, and you can mess around with it to adjust it as you like after.
Yep. Okay, so going on of this, tips and tricks that we have is the copy paste for linear objects. So this is also something that a lot of users were requesting. So how to can I copy paste a fence, right? So before you couldn't, now you can. So you can do a copy and then you do a paste, and you're going to have the same fence to apply it over here, right? So why is this helpful? Is because sometimes you're going to have a fence that's going to change shapes depending on milestones. So instead of redrawing that fence all over again, you can simply copy paste and then adjust that fence to the size that you want. So let's say that at a specific point in time, this fence is going to come to here, and I'm going to define that this stage is going to be after my excavation. So this new fence is going to start on the foundation finish. Oops. Foundation finish. Done. And this one is going to be done before the foundation finish. Okay. So when I do that, now I just created quickly over here a state where my fence changes location, as you can see over here. Cool. And I'm just going to inherit this parent dates, and that's it. So just a quick way for you to recreate that fence without having to draw it all over again.
Number one use case we get is doing slab edge protection or guardrails on the slab. So you can just like, sketch it onto one of the slabs and then be able to just copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. So if you're going to show the safety considerations of each pour, you can easily just do that there. That was something that you could just put it on the actual plane of the slab, copy paste, bring it up. That's another great use case for that.
Yeah. Another one that also can be used for that is for massing. So this copy paste now applies to every resource that's controlled by a line. Not resource, but every element that's controlled by a line. So 3D lines, zones, and massings also apply to that. So for example, let's say that I want to define a moment of a demolition for this building. So I'm going to create a massing over here that's going to represent that building. I'm going to do this very, very quickly and very, very wrong. So now when I create that massing over there, and let's say that I want to show that this is going to be demolished at some point, but instead of having like the massing like red since the beginning, I'm going to simply copy paste that massing and I'm going to put that on the location, the correct location, using my snapping tools, right? So something like that, and then snap it again, flip it over, and then I'm just gonna move it over here to be a little bit quicker. And then this new massing, I'm gonna color it red, and I'm gonna say that that massing is gonna show up on this milestone and be done on that same milestone. And this one, I'm gonna remove that before the new massing comes over. So now I have a project start stage, and then there's a moment where that massing becomes red, and then it's gone, right? But actually, these are two massings. They are just in the same spot, and they have different colors and different points in your timeline. So it's a good way for you to highlight specific actions happening on those masses. Okay. So that can be also used for zones and for 3D lines. So just go crazy with the copy paste. Another thing that I wanted to show today also is how to update your map, right? So I've seen a couple people struggling with this sometimes. So basically, I'm gonna just do like a very easy step-by-step over here. So I'm gonna create a new project that's gonna be called Topo Test, and I'm gonna put this project over here in Broad Commons, like I always do. And I'm going to create this map as a topographic map. Okay. So we'll start like that. And then let's say that at some point I start doing my work and everything, and I'm struggling with the terrain, and I would like to have this as a flat scenario, right? So what should I do? So I'm just going to add a crane over here for as an example. So now if I want to change this topographic to flat, I just go back to the project page, click on update, and then this will tell me that there's like some changes that you might need to adjust. And then from here, I'm just gonna redo those steps up to the point where I select the type of the map that I'm gonna have, and I'm gonna select the flat map, right? So it's when I update these settings, now this new project is gonna be updated to a flat map. So when I open that, you'll see that the map is now flat, but all my buildings are hovering like this and the crane as well. So if I had created a linear object like a fence over here, the fences by default, they will follow the ground and the terrain to be placed. So it would be adjusted. But for these elements over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the surrounding buildings. I'm going to select one, hold control, select all of them and delete these surrounding buildings. And when I go back to the page, I'm going to go in here on the three dot menu and click on sync surroundings. So this will regenerate those buildings on the right elevation, right? So this is one thing that you should do if you're using the surrounding buildings on your elements. And for these elements that are hovering right now, you can simply right click on that element and click on drop to surface, and that object is going to find the surface. So we don't have yet the means to update everything to the right elevations, but there are some quick, easy ways that you can do that yourself. Okay,
Just
so
lastly,
just keep
select
that in mind.
basically the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a question that came in. So from Nick, can we have an option of quote paste at the same position and paste to milestone and select this milestone we want to paste in, would be great to
That's
have
a
it.
great
So
feature request. I actually asked the team to do this yesterday. So if you can put
so
that
that does
feature
that mean it's
request,
already we already have a ticket for that?
not yet. I just like told them
Nick, it
like,
helps if you post it, if you don't
yeah,
mind popping it in there, because the team will listen to you much more than they listen to us, right, Pedro?
yeah. Nobody care what I have to
Nobody
say.
cares what we think.
Yeah.
They only care what the customer thinks. So yeah, if you can do that, that would help our case.
For sure. Yeah, so about that update map, so a couple things to remember to do is to do a hard refresh when you do the update. So you would like the software will kind of like recompute like everything that all the changes because of the map. Do the sync surroundings, adjust the resources, but also check the drawing overlay because if your map has changed a position like a size or address, your drawing overlay might have moved. Okay, so that's also something that you should always check whenever you update your map. Next one, zones to highlight areas. So this is interesting because sometimes you're using a like satellite image, and because of the satellite image, you might not always visualize your elements very clearly because like the satellite images is either too dark or like it's too destructive, and you kind of like don't identify the elements right away. So one thing that you can do is create a zone like this one over here that I created. That's just a white zone on that area, or it could even be like a bigger area just to highlight a specific area of your map. And then you create it as a white color and you play with the opacity. So you will kind of like lighten up that area a little bit, right? So this is a good way for you to kind of like really highlight the area where you're working on and also kind of like change the brightness of your background. Okay, so this is one thing that you can use that for, but also highlight like an impacted area of excavation or like where buildings were supposed to be before, after you demolished, and so on and so forth. Cool. So I have two things more that I want to show today. So one is the branding position. So not all users know about this, but sometimes when you draw a fence, we usually suggest that you draw everything clockwise, and just to keep the orientation of the objects correctly done. But sometimes you're gonna draw something and your branding is going to show up on the inside of those panels. You want to show up those brandings outside. So instead of redrawing the fence with the different orientation, you can simply go over here in the position of the logo and change that to from A to B or B to A, right? So this will make the fence, the branding go to the other side, but also most of elements will have like different positions for your branding. So if you explore this a little bit, you will see like what you have over here, right? Okay.
Also, you can there's multiple logos. If you want your client's logo versus your logo, you can toggle from that as well. So you have one
Mhm.
default that will show up automatically, and then you can adjust it at the resource level if you want to show like
Yeah.
your client's logo or a different version of your own logo if you have multiple logos.
Hmm. Exactly.
Also, I see a lot of people using some like if you have like a sometimes you have a site board you want to show like
Yeah.
you want to show the city or something, that you have a safety board or you have a site plan board like near the entry of the site. You can actually use the logo feature to use to put that on the fence as well. Yeah, actually there's even a
Hmm.
resource you could use for that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. There are a couple of things that you can do over here to with like to explore more about the branding capabilities and whatnots. Uh, okay.
Oh, question coming in on that from James. Asymmetric fences, barbed wire at an outward angle. Is there a way to change the orientation of the sketch?
Not really. That one we don't have it. Like
Could that just be a feature request for the resource? Like if you do barbed wire, could you just have it angle in versus angle out?
I believe so. Yeah, so we could have like a parameter that controls the orientation of the barbed wire. So this one over here. So if you want to put it outwards,
Maybe
like
it
right
has it.
now,
Did you check if he maybe Cohen's gonna yell at us if he's like, I already did that for you. Just check,
uh,
is it, oh, that doesn't look like it, hey?
no, I don't think so. Yeah,
You
that's
can
just
only
like
go
length and height.
in, because it might
Yeah.
go out sometimes, right, as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
sometimes.
like we can add, this is the type of thing that we can change just on the resource. So if there's a resource that you would like to see something like that, just let us know because we can add a angle parameter to this to make it face the other way. Okay, cool.
Perfect.
And ooh, we are in the break on time over here. Should I keep going or?
Just keep, yeah. Well, if you need to drop off, no problem. We'll go keep going for another 3-4 minutes. If you have questions, we can
Mhm.
hang out for a little bit. But yeah, if you need to drop off, no problem, of course.
Cool. Yeah, so I would like to explore a little bit about the sketching as well, because like sometimes I've seen people drawing specific things and they don't know exactly how to polish it. So I'm gonna use a loading over here as an example. And when I start drawing a sketch, there are a lot of different tools over here that I can use. And for you to work faster, you should be acquainted with the shortcuts, right? So M for move, L for line, A for arc, and so on and so forth. So for arcs, for example, you always have to have a line for you to start from that line to create your arc. But let's say that you want to do a specific thing like this, and you want to do another arc and whatnot. So usually for arcs, I prefer to keep to do them like in a specific um, kind of like initial shape, and then I just edit the sketch and move the radius over here to adapt to what I what I need. So this moving action, it's kind of like gives you the ability to make the arc a little bit more like adjusted to the lines and whatnot. And if you don't know where the center point is, you can always click on the arc itself and it will highlight the center point. So you can just play around with that radius. Okay.
Wait.
So
For us mere mortals, what did you do there? You're holding control, right?
no, I don't need to hold
Oh,
control, just hit on move and then you
mm,
click on the object and then you play around with it. Okay. So for you to adjust this, you have to use your move function.
move.
So if you hold shift while doing the move, like the move will happen on a specific constraint and so on and so forth. So it's a good way for you to not worry about making it like super polished on the first try. Do like a shape that is close to what you want and then go back to the moving actions so you can like play around and adjust this to a little bit more to what you want. Okay. Another thing that I would like to say about the um, sketching is that sometimes people don't use these options over here in the bottom that much, but the perpendicular one is super helpful because you can create like elements that are like more aligned with each other. So for example, when you click on perpendicular, you click on the line that you want to adjust and the reference line, and the first line will adjust to it. So you can do drawings that are a little bit more polished, you know. So in this case over here, I want to make this line parallel to this one. So I'm going to click on this line, click on parallel, and then click on the second one. And now this line is parallel to this one. And then I want to make this kind of like arc start over here and then parallel again. So now I have something that's more polished to what I want. Cool. So the sketching, it's something that's kind of like a organic idea of like a cmBuilder. You just like start playing around with these elements and see what you can do to create the shapes the way that you want. Okay, cool. I think that's it. So,
Are any questions? Does anyone have anything else they want to pop in here? If there's something you're working on right now
mhm.
that you could
I'm
be
also gonna put in
useful.
like a little survey over here in the chat. So the people that are still here, you can go into this survey and let us know what you think about this webinar. What are the new other things that you would like to know more, would like us to talk about on these webinars, just so we can like plan around your needs. Cool.
Okay, great. And we'll just keep it rolling here. So we'll do another one in 4 to 6 weeks or so. And topography, City of Vancouver's tiny. Oh yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, there's each city has some, depending on the city, has different levels of open data and stuff like that. That's
Hmm.
fantastic. Thanks for sharing,
Yeah.
James. Yeah,
Yeah. There.
we've got in there and down that rabbit hole a couple times.
Yeah, so like this is a good example of like how would I represent this inside cmBuilder quickly, right? So you could just take like a screenshot or export these contour lines and then apply them into cmBuilder so you can see where these contour lines are and whatnot, and then use the custom terrain tool to adjust our terrain to the correct course, correct elevations. Print page saves the contour line as vectorized elements. Interesting. Yeah. So this is kind of hard because like every city has its own kind of like idea. A lot of people have requested us to grab these information from the cities, but it's their own database, so it's hard to find to find like a good integration with every city's system, right?
We also have lots of cities covered in our customer base, but it definitely it's a great feedback, and there's definitely some of these kind of site specific or like city specific data sources, which is going to make, I think, the future skate to where the puck is going. This is where most cities are going. A lot of them building digital twins of cities and stuff like that, and open sourcing that. And we definitely plan to try to incorporate that into cmBuilder as much as possible. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah, thanks, James, for sharing in the community. For all the local Vancouver or Greater Vancouver folks, please feel free to use that. It's fantastic. Yes, we will send out the recording, Jacob. Thanks, Gabe. We will send out the recording shortly. It shouldn't take us long. And then we'll actually, feel free to share it with other people on your team. We're actually might even this time we've never done before. We might put it in the banner of the product for a couple days too, in case someone wants to check it. Oh, fantastic, Jacob. That's great. If you're new, you feel free. Actually, Pedro, just show how Jacob can book a session with you. So if you go up to the help section, that's where most of all your stuff is. You can just go book support session. So feel free to drop that in our calendar, and we're happy to do more of a one-on-one with you. Thank you, Jean-Luc. Appreciate that. Have a great weekend. And fantastic. Thanks, Jacob.
Cool.
Okay, we'll wrap it. Oh, wait, we were supposed to do a face melting solo.
My own.
Where's the guitar? Oh, we promised the people. We promised.
You really want to finish this session,
I
right?
know.
To
I really
like
wanted that.
expel everyone from here.
Pedro's quite the musician. He's quite the musician. We try to. Oh, anyways, next time for face melting solo. Next time, promise. Pedro will do it, right, Pedro?
I promise. Yes, I will do it.
I've already told Pedro that he has to do a face melting solo. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
And to our American
Nice
friends, happy 4th, and have a great long weekend.
Bye then.